to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the interests and actions of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today is a true skate rat and a legendary figure of the Swedish skate scene. John Dahlquist is a skateboard teacher and the vice principal of Bryggeriets High School in Malmö, Sweden. Bryggeriets Gymnasium was founded in 2006 as the first ever skateboarding high school, offering students access to an amazing indoor skatepark, skateboard culture lessons along with the rest of the more academic classes that they are required to attend to complete their high school diploma. The list of incredible skaters that went through Bryggeriets speaks for itself. Sarah Merle, Oscar Rosenberg aka Oski, Didrik Galasso aka Deeds, Phil Wester, Heitor da Silva, to name a few. I had the opportunity to sit down with John to discuss all things Bryggeriets and why skateboarding is a powerful educational tool. So here's my conversation with John Dahlquist. I hope you'll enjoy it. Well, thank you again. I was looking forward very much to talking to you. I was really surprised actually when you reached out first after checking out my interview with Patrick, and I was actually just thinking a few days prior to your message that I wanted to reach out. So I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about what you do at Bryggeriets.
Well, thank you. It was actually after I've had Patrick Odell as a guest at the school, and it's sort of sometimes I see it as sort of part of my job to keep up with what's happening in skateboarding, and
sure.
And with that podcast, I found it really interesting. So I just wanted to. It's so easy these days to just DM and say, thank you or well done or interesting.
Yeah.
So it was, stars aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and thank you. I'm really, really stoked. And maybe to get us started, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, about where you grew up and how you started skating? And we don't have to go too much in detail about that, but just pretty much what brought you to skateboarding in the first place?
Yeah, I guess to put me in a context or to understand what I'm doing now, you probably have to know a little bit about my background, because it all results in what I'm doing today. Mm-hmm. So John Dahlquist turning 45 in a couple of months, and I started skateboarding when I was 10. So That's late 80s. I think it was Christmas of 87. But it was right before the tech era, when skateboarding was still sort of new and not that many people skated. So we had to find out about skateboarding ourselves. And then my family moved down south in Sweden to close to Malmö, where I live now and have lived ever since. But in Malmö, there was a skate scene. But Sweden, probably like France, was really far away from the US and where skateboarding happened. So we had to, I guess it was a school in DIY, but we didn't know it at the time. But we, like everyone else, started making our own videos, building our own ramps, yada yada. But me and a bunch of my friends almost took that as far as we could by starting, Bryggeriets Skatepark was started by my group of friends and different magazines, and my friend Martin, who was into computers at an early stage, started doing perhaps the first online magazine, which gave me a platform to write and something to shoot photos for. Not that I'm a photographer, but to be photographed for, like a platform to showcase what we were doing. And that led to the whole DIY scene. And then most people probably know my friend Pontus's story from going from Malmö to professional and then starting Polar from Malmö.
Right.
So that's just a mix. Most people have that story, but that's the mix that I come from. And the skate park Bryggeriet in Malmö applied in 2005 for a permit to start a high school, which is it's a pretty unique, internationally, it's a unique law that allows companies and NGOs to apply for permits to start schools.
Right, yeah.
The skate park did that in 2005, got the permit, and then hired 2 principals to start a high school and in some way involve skateboarding in it. And I was between jobs at the time. I'm trained to be a social worker, and I was in between jobs at the time. And someone put me in contact with the 2 principals to sort of pick my brain as a skater and maybe a little bit as a social worker to see how it would be possible to incorporate skateboarding into a school setting, to the curriculum, if you will. And at the end of the meeting, they offered me the job to build a subject around skateboarding.
Yeah.
But that was a crash course in my... I mean, that was a really short version, but it gets really sickening, I think, to talk about how everyone started skating and how rough and tough it was in the beginning. So hope that's context enough.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so you said you started skating in 87, and at what point would you say that Malmö kind of really exploded basically as a skate scene? Was that already booming when you started, or did it come a little bit later? Or
No. We didn't have anything. Malmö is an industrial city.
Right.
It was kind of poor, high unemployment, crime rates I think were up at the time, usually how it is when it's poor. And then in 2001, the city of Malmö had a vision that where the industrial area was turning into this new modern living area. It was called Live 01, Live 2001. So they started building in the industrial area where all the factories were shut down. And that's actually where I'm sitting right now. That's where I live. But as part of that, they incorporated a skate park, Stapelbäddsparken, that you might have heard of. It's the biggest skate park in Malmö.
It's a cement park, right? One of the largest in Europe. I heard. Or...
Yeah, it's really big, and it was built on the initiative of John Magnus and Bryggeriets Skatepark. So that, in combination with the Quicksilver bowl riders and good weather in Malmö for once, just got thousands and thousands of people to come to the event. And all of a sudden, skateboarding was this new hot thing that actually attracted a lot of people to Malmö. But prior to that, to the opening of the indoor skate park and the possibility to have big skate events like European Open. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That traveled around and like people would come to Malmö to skate the park. That sort of had that effect too, that Malmö was a place with a scene, and hopefully our crew with making magazines and getting coverage and skating had an impact too.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Pontus at the beginning as well. He's been also a big. As I told you, I first saw footage of Malmö that I remember of, at least through his video, his first video, "The Strongest of the Strange."
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite videos of all time. Like it's a really kind of weird one, but it's a cool one as well. And actually just had Scott Bourne on the show a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, he has a part in it.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts in the video, and I was so stoked to get to talk to him. And
Strongest of the Strange had an impact too, of course. I was really proud to be part of that video too. It was cool. And it was through his maybe Pontus's first experimental part of his life when he started doing things that were pretty out there. So it was that was cool. That was the first one, and then the second one was In Search of the Miraculous.
Right. Yeah. A few years later. And that was all prior to Polar, I think. I think he started Polar later, maybe in 2011 or something like that.
Yeah, who was still on Cliché, I think, for the first one, and then a free agent for the second one.
Yeah.
And then it turned into Polar, I think, at the end of In Search of the Miraculous.
Yeah.
I want to hear a funny story about In Search of the Miraculous.
Please.
How it almost didn't happen. The night that Pontus was done with the video Oh, this is one of the most painful stories. The night he was done, I helped him with the subtitles. There's a small part about the shipping area that turned into Stapel, and I helped with the subtitles to translate from Swedish to English. And we finished it off Saturday night, it must have been, at his house. And we were just chilling, laid back, sitting there. I crossed my legs over the chair. And then we were about to get up and go out and have a drink. And as I rose, my leg caught the hard drive cord, and the hard drive fell to the ground and broke.
Oh my God.
And started making this weird sound, and the whole video was on that hard drive.
Shit.
And I've never seen Pontus that silent. He was just, his face turned white.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Since it was a Saturday and stores weren't open on Sunday, I couldn't go buy a new hard drive for him until 24 hours later, and everything worked out. But it was some of the most nervous parts of my life, I think, those 24 hours.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Oh my God.
He did have a backup on his computer, but it was just that fear of what if 5 years of work just went to shit.
Just vanished. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but Pontus was really cool about it. He didn't say a word, but I think he was pretty relieved when I delivered the new hard drive for him.
Yeah. Do you guys still talk? I mean, did you stay friends after that? Or is he still bummed about it? Or
No. It's good. It's more like, it's more like family than friendship almost. It's, you can't, it's hard to see that anything should really break that bond.
Yeah. Well, thank God, it was all good, and the video did exist in the end. But yeah, so yeah, his videos have definitely shined some light on the Malmö skate scene.
Yeah, for sure.
So Bryggeriets, how do you pronounce it properly, actually? How would you say it in Swedish?
Bryggeriet.
Bryggeriet.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's the brewery. It's an old brewery.
Yes, I think I read that somewhere. Yeah, okay. So the skate park was there a little bit prior to the school starting, right?
Yeah, 7 years before. So it opened in the fall of 1998.
Okay. And so, but you waited until 2005 or 6 because, as you said, there was this change in the law that made it possible to...
Yeah, August of 2006 was when the school started.
Right, okay. So it's been 15 years now?
Yeah, 15 years.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, and yeah, congrats. It's
thank you.
Definitely inspirational. And so, what was your position when you when the school first started? Because now I know you're the vice principal, and you're also a skateboard instructor. Is that the proper?
Yeah, just teacher.
Teacher, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was involved in the skate park from the beginning, so I had my foot inside the door already. But when it came to the school, I started building a curriculum around skateboarding. And then in Swedish schools, you have a school social worker. So part of my job was to be a social worker too, and have therapeutical conversations or help with paperwork that students might need or stuff like that. Until the school was fully built, then because first it was only 50 students, and then second year was 100 students, and third year was the first full year, so 150. But only about half of them are skaters. The rest have been different profiles, but right now it's art, skateboarding, photography, and film. In the beginning, it was a little bit different, and then. At some point when I was established, I think the two principals offered me to, because I was there from the beginning too, they offered me the possibility to start the principal training program as a university program. And I think it was partly because I was already acting as a school leader because we built the school together, but also maybe a way to just give me further education because I'm not a teacher. So so that I learned more about the school system and stuff. So that was cool.
Yeah. So who else was on board when the school first started? Who was the rest of the team around you?
It was just two principals, me, and then a film teacher, photo teacher, Swedish, math, English teacher. So it was, I can't remember how many we were, but not that many. But now we're up to 20 something teachers and administrators and mentors and school nurse and social worker and stuff. So it's a legit school now. And I'm happy to say that we're pretty well renowned in the area for giving a good education, whereas in the beginning it was a joke.
Because it was new, it was a new concept, and
it was new, and even the local newspaper wrote this comic strip about what a joke it was to put skateboarding in a high school. A high school is where you traditionally go to get a diploma and go on to university, which is still the aim. I don't know what those kids like Ville, Oski, Hate, or Sarah, I mean, it's just a side effect that they became pro. That was never our intention. That's on them.
Yeah, and also not all students that come out of Bryggeriets become pro skaters. Like most of them will have different career paths and probably even go outside of skateboarding.
Yeah, which is, I mean, the main focus here is to give all students a diploma so that they can go on to higher education. But it's so amazing to see what happens. A lot of students seem to thrive in that environment and become really good at different things. And it's cool to see too, in that it's almost like when you boil something with the lid on, pressure boiler.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that sometimes when skateboarding and other creative outlets just burst through the lid after a while. And I mean, you've probably seen a few examples of that, like in magazines and stuff that you can sort of trace back to the school.
Yeah.
And that's cool to see. But it's just as cool for me to see, people have become architects or found themselves or just had this platform or forum where they were allowed to get education and maybe feel safe at the same time. There's actually plenty of stories of students that sort of hated school for the last 9 years, and then when they start gymnasium, our school all of a sudden get this sense that maybe someone cares and they're taking their passion and what they think is important, which is in my case skateboarding, is taken seriously.
Yeah,
and that's a pretty powerful tool, and it turns out you can do a lot with that force, especially if you can direct it in the right direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I first heard about the school, I just thought to myself that I would have loved to do something like that when I was in high school. Because I've always hated school. I was terrible at school. I was in a kind of difficult, not difficult, but like a high-level high school when I was at that age. So I had to work my ass off, and I basically finished. I had my like what we call the baccalaureat in France, which is like the diploma at the end of high school. And I was just burnt out. I was like so done with, and it was like, okay, so now that's done. Now you have to study something and figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I was just exhausted and had, worked my ass off learning so much shit that I don't even remember at all today, that haven't been useful at all in my life. And it was just basically a very painful, long process. So when I heard, okay, like this school teaches skateboarding, but also all the rest of the more academic classes, and at the end you have students that come out of there motivated and they feel like they can thrive and just figure out what they're going to do with their lives much better than in the regular system, basically.
Yeah, hopefully that how it works. Yeah, I mean, what you just said, that's what I hear from most guests, and I'm super lucky to have a lot of people supporting the school from different interesting parts of skateboarding. But they're all adults that come into the school, and there's a big skate park in the middle of the school, and you go to school with other skaters. But then you got to keep in mind that these teenagers are teenagers, which is a really hard part of life. Yeah. And also it's a skateboarding high school, but they feel forced to go there either by their parents or by society. And when you just have that little thing that feels like an obligation, all of a sudden some of the fun is taken away. So I try to keep that in mind when I meet them and when I teach them, and when I see lack of motivation, that it's kind of hard to do the same thing for 12 years. And even though I try to, do it differently or do it in a way that suits them, it's still, graduation is sort of like getting out of prison too.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be a good prison.
Yeah.
with good transitions and proper ledges and stuff.
Exactly. I mean, I would love to go to that prison for sure. You mentioned a few of the people, of the famous people that made it as pro skaters after coming out of Bryggeriets. Like you mentioned Heitor, Sarah Merle.
Yeah, she was the first student to ever turn pro. She started in 2006.
Oh, okay, amazing. I didn't know she was the first. Okay.
Jacke Ovgren, the illustrator for Polar, he was the first batch too.
Oh, he was there as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And Vil Wester, what's his last name? Wester?
Wester?
Yeah. Who skates for Polar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing, by the way. Yeah,
yeah, he's amazing in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And then Herman Steine, who rides for Real. Simon Isaksson, pro for Sauer.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah.
I almost forget him too. Oh, yeah. Carl Fredrik Furley from Norway. He was one of the first Instagram skaters. He was super big on Instagram for a while.
Okay.
Tao, the filmer, he makes the Polar video right now. He works for Polar, but he does other projects too. But he's like Jamie Platt and Ville and Oski's filmer.
Okay.
But the list goes on. But once I get started, it brings back so many great memories. But it's also easy to forget when, and this guy. But one who's actually worth mentioning is Stefan Osterheim from Norway. He had a bit of a career. He did good in Tampa Am a while back and stuff. But he went back to Norway and got an education as a pedagogical education.
Oh, okay.
And then took up skateboarding in a big way again. And now he's actually my colleague. So we teach skateboarding together. So
that's amazing. Yeah,
it's like a full circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he's great. He's great as a teacher, but he's seriously one of the best skateboarders in the world when it comes to tech ledge stuff.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
And Nando, of course, Fernando Bramsmark.
Yes.
Turned pro too.
Yeah, and Deeds as well.
Oh yeah, Deeds,
Dietrich,
of course.
Galasso, is that how? Yeah.
One thing that I actually thought about before we started, when you got in contact, was one really great thing about being a teacher is that I get to meet them when they're teenagers, and those formative years. It's so interesting. It's super hard, I gotta say. I tried to do a good job, but I realized too that it's really hard to get anything across to someone who's 17 and who's on a path to just kill it on a skateboard. But it's kind of cool to meet them before they become their professional persona. Like he was Dietrich Galasso when he went to school, and then in his professional career he became Deeds, sort of like Nando and Oski, almost like these superheroes like from Marvel, who are Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, actually. Yeah. I actually watched one of the little documentaries that was made on Bryggeriets a few days ago. I don't remember which one it was, but I saw footage of Deeds skating when he was a student at Bryggeriets.
It was Chris Mulhern's piece for the Barracks.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's Deeds. Like, I would have never recognized him. He was all skinny. He didn't have any tattoos.
Young Dylan.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny. He was already an amazing skater. Like I was impressed by the footage, but I think if I had seen just the images without knowing it was him, I wouldn't have guessed. But it was interesting. But yeah, so plenty of really amazing talent came out of that school, obviously. And so how do you basically teach skateboarding? I read in some interviews you did that it's actually hard to teach something like that. How do you approach your role, basically? How do you guide your students? How do you accompany them on a day-to-day basis? Like, what does that consist of?
How much time do we have? No, I'll try to break it down. And I want to say a couple of things and hopefully land in how to teach skateboarding. But before answering that question, and I get that question all the time, of course, and I had to ask myself that question. And that's why I first turned the job down when I was offered it, because I didn't believe in institutionalizing skateboarding in that way, and especially not teaching it. But then I started asking myself and teachers in general, like, how do you teach at all? How do you teach anyone anything? And there's a bunch of scholars in modern education who have ideas and theories about teaching. But listen to this. I'll read this out loud and see. If we want to succeed in pushing a person towards a set goal, we have to find her where she is and start from that point. This is the secret to teaching. The teacher who does not understand this fools himself when he thinks he can help others. To teach, I have admittedly to understand more than the person I'm trying to teach, but first and foremost, I have to understand what he or she understands. If I cannot do this, I cannot teach. A real teacher starts with a humble approach to those who wants to learn, hence an understanding that teaching is not a will to rule, but to serve. If I cannot do this, I can't help anyone.
Interesting.
This was actually Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard wrote this in 1859. And it's basically what all the scholars are struggling to write about today. But if Kierkegaard was a skater, he'd understand that skateboarding is the perfect subject for teaching. Because a lot of teachers say you have math is usually the easiest example. You want everybody to learn equations. But if the person doesn't know how to count, it's super hard to know the next step. Whereas in skateboarding, everyone starts on their level trying to take the next step.
Right.
And if you teach everyone the same in math class or skate class, you're not going to go anywhere. You have to understand where that person starts and then go the next step together. And with skateboarding, it's so sick because you can actually do it together. Like if someone wants to do a trick and I'm down to do a trick, we can do it together. And that way we can learn from each other and be like, how's your foot placement? How's your, how much speed do you take? And all of a sudden someone else is teaching me how they're doing, especially if they land the trick before I do. And we all know that the best way to learn is to teach. So there's so many little things in the skateboard subject that actually relates and works so much better than a lot of the other subjects traditionally. To keep it super short, Dylan William, one of the main scholars on teaching.
You said he was like the Mark Gonzalez of teaching or something like that? I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I guess you could say. He said that good teachers find the student where they are and evaluate what the next step is. And then you try to take that next step together. It's called formative assessment.
Yes,
and that's what most schools around the world are trying to do right now. And also individualized teaching, like to teach, well, it's basically the same, to help every student individually instead of teaching a whole class the same thing. And skateboarding, by definition, works that way. It's the nature of skateboarding. And my aim is to, if you learn that process of learning, if you can on a meta level understand that this is how I learn, then you can take your skateboarding skills and use them in other walks of life too.
Yeah.
That's my highest goal, is to get the students to learn how they learn and then use that everywhere else.
Optimize their learning process and make it more efficient, basically.
I mean, we've seen that on so many there's so many examples. Probably when you spoke to Scott Bourne, his approach to writing was probably the same as he had to skateboarding, and the same with Patrick Wallner, like the whole way of building it around that we just do things and learn as we go along and adapt to whatever comes through our path.
I think that's what attracted me to skateboarding in the first place. When I started skating at 13 years old, and I liked it because it wasn't like very structured. You could skate in front of your house or on the street or go to a skate park or whatever, but there was just so much freedom.
Yeah. I
never had a teacher, so I just, watched videos and figured out how to ollie. It took me a long time to actually, get a proper ollie, but and I was never really a good skateboarder, but I've always loved it so much because it was just freedom, this sense of freedom and just expressing myself and a creative outlet.
Yeah, and those values are so important. And my biggest fear is to step on those values and make skateboarding something too structured so that the students lose their freedom. So early on, I decided that every assignment I give, I ask the students for permission first. I come up with the idea and then I say, do you think this is something you could learn from? Does this seem like a good idea, something you want to do or would be down to do? And then if they say no, I always ask them to come up with something better. And no matter what I think about it, an idea that comes from someone who's also going to do the work is always better than my idea. But I think it's sort of like a security for me to make sure that I'm not stepping on someone's, integrity. And you have to be really respectful too, because I work with their identity. It's a part of in life where you are your, if you are a skateboarder, that's so...
It defines you, yeah.
Yeah, it defines you. If I come in and say you're whack or that stuff is bad, then
especially at that age as well.
Yeah, you can hurt someone. Yeah, so I have to be really respectful, or I try to be. I don't know if I always am, but I try to think about that.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how do students get into the school? Obviously they need to have a strong interest in skateboarding, but how do they apply? Are there exams, or what are the requirements basically to enter Bryggeriets? Apart from being, I guess you need to speak Swedish. For example, I don't think a student in France could come to Bryggeriets, or...
Yeah, that's because of two things. One, you have to understand Swedish because all the teaching is in Swedish. So that means we can accept students from Norway, Denmark, possibly Finland, but their school system is really different. We've only had one or two. And Iceland, because it has worked because they've had relatives and known enough of the language. So you need to understand the language. And then second of all, there's a treaty between the Scandinavian countries. The allowance you get to apply for a school can be moved between the different countries. So we basically get paid for every student that we accept. But then the application is super simple. You apply as you would to any other high school. You're free to apply to any high school, and whoever has the best grades out of the people who apply get in first.
Okay.
And then there's a little bit of a different system. We don't have to go into that for Scandinavian students. They apply in a certain way, but that's more a treaty between our countries. So there's no audition, or you can't be just really good at skating.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask, is there a minimum level of skateboarding?
No.
How many boards can you ollie? Or
as a skateboard teacher, my aim is for everyone to find their place in skateboarding, be it, as a filmer, as a professional skater, or someone who's just part of the group and likes the environment. We don't try to value it that much and just use it to thrive as a person. Because if you read the Swedish school law, before passing grades and preparing for higher education, it says that the aim of the Swedish school system on gymnasium level, gymnasium is high school, I should say.
Yes.
It's just a weird word in English.
Yeah.
is to prepare students for adult life and make them democratic citizens.
Right.
So we put a really great emphasis on, thriving as a person and feeling good about yourself and being in an environment where you're allowed to fail and try new things. Again, skateboarding works perfectly in that environment because it's one of the few subjects where you don't get super frustrated when you fail 100 times.
You're used to it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, skaters do, and there's tears and everything in class sometimes. But imagine when you do that equation and you don't figure it out the second time, you usually give up. And then my skate students, they're like, "Oh, I failed, but I think if I give it 200 more tries, I'm gonna make it." It's like, if you could apply that to math class,
to other things,
yeah, anything would be possible.
Yeah, that's actually a very strong, I think, value of skateboarding is, how do you say, persistence or?
Yeah, grit.
Because it's just hard. It's skateboarding is difficult. Just even doing an ollie is not that easy, or just even standing on a board and not falling when you're really starting when you're a kid and whatever. But
and the beauty of getting cred for reaching the next step. I mean, in school, it's usually whoever gets the most point on the test is the best and the one that gets the most cred. Whereas in skateboarding, you can tell when someone's been struggling to land her first heel flip, which we had last week. The whole school gets super stoked. Like, did you hear about it last week? She finally landed it. Yeah. And then, someone else like Oski or someone does his first 540 and it's the same bus. But on two, people understand that it's just as hard for both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do you approach every student individually, basically? Because I understand that you're not really, it's not like you're in front of a classroom showing on a board like how to do a kickflip or whatever. It's more like you're individually in a relationship with each student and trying to help them, I guess, perfect their skateboarding or just get better and get more confident and maybe more creative.
Well, first of all, I want to point out that what I'm saying here is what I'm trying to do. Most of the time I fail too. It's I don't succeed the way I want to with reaching everyone and helping everyone to succeed. But it's more my philosophy I want to explain.
Sure.
It might sound arrogant otherwise. But I try to come up with, let's call it assignments that you can do individually. Like, for example, we've worked with SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, accepted, realistic, and time set goals, which is a basic way of working with goals. And then we tried that out during a class. And so everyone can set their own goal depending on what they want to learn next. And then we evaluate and see, what did I learn? Why didn't it work out? Why did it work out? What's my next step? Sort of thing. But then when you share a passion with the students and you're into the same thing and you nerd away on the latest video and stuff, it tends to build really good relationships. And to be a teacher, I think you have to understand that you can't just walk into a classroom and say, I'm going to teach you. The students have to give you a mandate to teach. They have to trust you.
Trust you, yeah.
Or else you can't teach anyone anything. And I have a couple of things that I think stands out for me as a skateboard teacher. And it's one, that I really, really care about the subject. I probably care a lot more than some of the students because it's who I am and I really believe in the whole thing. But then the second thing is that students tend to get injured every once in a while. And when the toughest guy who has attitude or whatever, just trying to draw up the worst case scenario, when you take that person and you carry that student into the hospital and take care of him or her and help them, symbolically it's like, I can trust John because I know that when I fall, he's there to carry me almost. Symbolically, but also if you act that way towards people, you build that trust and relationship. And I'm super lucky to have that with a lot of my students. And when I have that, there's no limit to what we can do. Then I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing as much as I can until graduation. And it's a really cool experiment to just see how someone goes from maybe not that motivated to trusting, and then maybe succeeding in things that he or she didn't think was possible from the beginning. And that's the greatest kick that a teacher can get. But it's all based on building strong relationships.
And trust, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You also pointed out something that you wanted to address, which was a low effective response or more high effective response. I understand it's more or less the emotional response to a situation, whatever it is. What was basically the idea behind that you wanted to discuss?
There's a trend in social work and teaching that when someone is emotionally, affected, you should approach that person with a low effective response. If someone is super angry, just be calm.
Yeah.
And in skateboarding and in my teaching, I like to do it the other way around sometimes and be like high effective response and be like, hell yeah, let's go. Sorry, I can't curse, but...
No, you can. I mean, it's all good. It's a podcast.
Yeah. But just lighting that flame and be like, let's go right now. And it's really relieving, especially with I sometimes have a lot of energy, and just to be able to just, get the room to explode and see how that affects everyone. And all of a sudden the session is just booming.
Yeah,
especially with, if you have a couple of skaters with ADHD that you can get fired up, great things can happen. There's plenty of examples where the session just blows up and people just go above and beyond. Yeah. So sometimes it's just nice to give it your all instead of being all controlled and sit back and be too low effective, if you really care. And I do.
Yeah. Actually, I exchanged some messages with Danijel Stankovic that I hope to get on the podcast as well. Yeah. And I asked him if he had a question for you. And I'm just going to read you what he told me. It's not really a question, but it's kind of a question. But so he said, John is a true inspiration. At his age, most just skate for fun or exercise, but he's still out there trying to stack clips like it's 1997 or something. What is it that keeps driving him and motivating him to go as hard as he does? And you pretty much just touched on that about, the energy and being very passionate still today at 45 about skateboarding, pretty much as you were 30 years ago. And how do you keep that fire burning, basically? How do you keep so...
It's very selfish, but, spending time with these teenagers who are also experts at what they do. We might try to define skateboarding and tell them how it should be, but they're the most active skaters. And especially if you look at concentration of amount of skateboarders, our school might be one of the most concentrated places in the world at a certain time where the active skaters are doing active skateboarding, not industry stuff but just pure skating. It's a great privilege to get to be part of that crew. In the sense, that's just a fountain of youth. But I also think, or I feel that I have an obligation to keep up with stuff and to be interested and to skateboard. Because if I didn't, there's someone else who would do my job so much better than I do.
You wouldn't be as relevant, basically.
Yeah. I've been trying to quit this job for the last 12 years because I thought I was just going to do 3 years and then turn it over to someone else when I had sort of a handbook on how to teach skateboarding and just hand it over to the next guy.
Yeah.
But I'm still just scratching on the surface, and there's new people coming all the time, and it's still interesting. And I'm lucky enough to have, I have severe knee problems, but all in all, I can still hang and skate actively. But the day I can't, when I can't anymore, I'm gonna hand over the torch. But it's still really fascinating to me, and I'm still super stoked that I can do it. And it's, like I said, a little bit of a fountain of youth just to get to be in the mix.
Yeah, no, it's super sick, and it's really inspiring. I'm sure lots of students must really look up to you and just watch you skate and just feel energized. Like, okay, I mean, I hope I'll still be as motivated to step on a skateboard in 10 years from now. I don't know if I will be, you know. So
those are very kind words, but what I want to show is that skateboarding can lead to things. Like, I want to be an example of that as a rider, as a principal, as a skater, as a maybe even, you know, what they view as an adult, that you can be a well-functioning adult,
whatever that is.
Yeah, and still, you know, skateboard.
Yeah. So you've been running the school the school has been going on for 15 years.
Yeah.
I understand there's like 3 classes of 50 students. I mean, three different years. So 150 students overall. And I'm sure there's been mostly boys, but we mentioned Sarah Merle at the beginning, who was actually the first pro out of that school.
Very important role model in that sense.
Absolutely. How is it looking today? Are you seeing a bit more girls coming in, or?
Finally, it's been such a slow process. I mean, we've been trying to do what we can on our end, and especially, you know, creating an environment where it's safe to be and everything. But skateboarding is a very conservative. What's the word? Is it a sport
activity,
or is it
activity outlet?
Thank you. Activity, art form.
Yeah.
It's like walking on a minefield.
Yeah, exactly.
But finally, we're seeing a change, and it's more and more open, and more girls apply. And the Bryggeriets Skatepark has done a great deal too with girls' nights and stuff, and the scene is really strong here in Malmö, and we can see how that reflects on the school too.
Yeah, that's great. I hope there's. I love seeing how open skateboarding is becoming.
Yeah,
because it like in the late 90s or whatever, it was so like how do you say, like cliquey or just very
full of rules. Everything was legal except the worst stupid things.
Exactly.
Which is the era where I grew up. Like that's still my view on skateboarding in a lot of ways. That affected me strongly, and aesthetically it was great, but otherwise it was kind of sketchy.
Yeah. No, so it's cool. I mean, I love seeing like just how open-minded it's becoming and just tolerant and welcoming and also just on skateboarding purely how creative it's become and how it's there's not just one way of skating that's like cool. You can do pretty much whatever you want, whether it's street or bowls or doing just no complies and wall rides or whatever. Just everything is acceptable basically, and everything can be cool. And I really like that era we're in. If
my crew that I work with at all is representative for skateboarding in general, I don't know, but I'm always in awe of how smart they are, and you know, with the heart and values in the right place compared to where I was at that age.
Yeah.
So it's because that's another question you get a lot, like, oh, the youth of today, they're stupid, or they don't understand, or this and that, and it's like they're pretty well off, most of them.
Yeah.
Like they're
gonna be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids are all right.
Yeah, for sure. Just to focus a bit again on the school, so there's obviously skate classes, so to speak. I mean, times that are dedicated to actual skating. And how do you also bring skate culture within the school? Do you show them like old videos from the 90s or stuff like that? Like, how do you basically educate about skate culture?
In the first year, they're kind of small. They're only 16, and they're used to school being school.
Yeah.
So before graduation, they're preparing to become, you know, independent adults. So I try to keep my teaching really tight in the beginning and then let go. And then at the end, they work on their own projects that might be a video part or something where I'm not that involved. But in the beginning, we teach history, for example. And I go through 70s, 80s, 90s history and look at video parks here and there.
Okay.
And then we always make videos where the students get to skate as if it was the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Up until recent, which is usually pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
But then I also teach a design class, and that's only for the skaters. So the other students take other classes at that time. But in that, we've been working together with Nike 1 year, and we worked with Stefan Janoski, and the students got to redesign one of his shoes, and then he came in to give feedback on the work.
Nice.
And this year we're working with CHPO brand, which is a Swedish watch brand. Mm-hmm. So they're actually pitching their ideas tomorrow as if they were a design company. So they're working in different groups, and then we're making a school watch via them. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way of just incorporating, the skateboard industry or the culture a little bit. Yeah. And then I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people supporting the school who can come in and give guest lecturing. Like Mander, the guy that does all the graphics for Flip, has been in. Jacke, of course, who's an old student. And like people from the industry. And we've had some heavy hitters too, like Tony Hawk, Bob Burnquist, Sean Malto, Ishad Ware, Johnny Wilson.
Wow.
Brian Anderson when he came out as gay, which was super amazing.
Yeah, it was a historical moment basically in skate culture, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I've built a lot around that, it's so great. Imagine like coming into high school and one of those people like Johnny Wilson, who's someone who's really influential, is in your classroom answering all your questions. But now it's almost gone full circle. So I have all these former students who can come in and do the same thing, which is super powerful.
Absolutely.
Because the students can relate and be like, that person standing in front of me was sitting in my desk not that long ago.
And it could be me in 10 years from now or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So that, it gives me a lot of leverage because it's great.
Yeah,
and
it means you're doing your job well.
Yeah. And two, it's really inspirational for both me and the students. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm trying to invite, in lack of a better word, reality into school and show the students that what they do in school actually holds for something or is worth something outside of school. Yeah.
Do you feel like, because basically everybody grows up in a different era of skateboarding. Like you said, you grew up skating in the late 80s and early 90s. I started skating in 2000, so a bit later. And skateboarding was a bit more developed. Like the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games were coming out. And my question is basically, today we're in an era where skateboarding is everywhere. Supreme is no longer a little skate shop in Manhattan. It's like this huge global billion-dollar company. And it was just in the Olympics last year, and everything is on Instagram. So we're in a very, very different world of skateboarding, basically.
Yeah.
And so how do you see your students today come into the class, basically, and how do they react when you're like, oh, let's watch, Eastern Exposure or like some old obscure Plan B videos from the early 90s? Are they kind of like, no, fuck that shit, or are they actually receptive and like, yeah, sure, let's check this out? Or
very receptive. And I can tell that there's different approaches to skateboarding, and I get emails all the time, especially from abroad, from parents who maybe have homeschooled their kids, for us to sort of take care of them and make them into, professional skaters.
Right.
Which is not how it works at all. But, they're at an age too where they're most of all curious, and that's a pretty good approach to have to anything.
Yeah.
So it's rare. I mean, you get sometimes skaters who only skate one way and who would never, skate a bowl or a skate park.
Or do hippie jumps or like obscure tricks. Or
But you have to be really, that's a phase. It's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
To really, it's rare in life that you really, really believe that strongly in something. But, fundamentalists, you have to handle them with care.
Yeah.
The concept of classroom is something that I find really interesting. And in my class, the students come in every day when it's not wintertime. And they're like, where are we going to go today?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what they're asking is, where are you taking us to learn new stuff today? And I always have to come up with something new. And we go different places and travel by train and stuff. And it's kind of fascinating to me that students don't do that in other subjects. Why is that not, the normal approach to history, for example? Yeah. Imagine if you had a history teacher who was like, medieval times, we're going down to the castle downtown, or math. Math happens outside. What if the math teacher took his or her students to home? We're going to repaint this room. How much paint do we need? Or today we're going to the bank to ask for a loan and to look at interest. And I'm really stoked on how I get to use the whole city as a classroom. Mm-hmm. And it's really grown on me, the whole concept of classroom. And to be honest, the school environment has looked the same since, the mid 1800s. It's rooms with chairs and tables and a bigger desk in the front. It's one of the worst places to learn stuff. It's really uninspiring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of boring. But I mean, we haven't come up with something better that works. I mean, there's pros and cons, and there's a lot of pros to that environment too. But it's not only the teachers who need to be progressive. A lot of students are really conservative too, because you're schooled in that system and you're looking for, 40-minute classes with a test at the end that you get points on. And I just don't, I try to be a teacher who does not, stand behind that system, but try to something different and see how it works.
Yeah, and also like you just mentioned, if you actually learned math or any subject, history, or just by being out and just doing things and seeing how they function in the real world outside, rather than just inside the classroom in theory. Yeah, I think that's very powerful.
And my experience too is that I always keep thinking about Steve Olson when I think about this stuff, is that every time I ask someone to come into class to meet my students or to share their story, they almost always say yes, because most people feel that you have an obligation to people getting education. Everyone has gone to school and you have this obligation to share your story and to help others if you can.
Yeah.
And then in an interview I listened to with Steve Olson and Alex Olson.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was, they went into the independent warehouse and took a bunch of stuff. And Alex said to his dad, we can't take this much. And Steve Olson said, you know what? They fucking owe. And sometimes I think about that everyone has gone through the educational system. So if I, as a teacher, ask someone to help the next generation, they fucking owe. So it's okay to at least ask. And I'm super stoked that so many people say yes and actually enjoy sharing. And it has a great impact on the students too.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I did an interview not very long ago with Arnaud de Dieu at Shifty, a Shifty school in Bordeaux. Mm-hmm. And he told me about his visit at Bryggeriets and how that really inspired him into creating Shifty School in Bordeaux, which is pretty much like what you're doing, but not in high school. It's not in high school. It's like after graduating from high school. He's doing like a bachelor and master's degree. Mm-hmm. You seem to inspire other people to do similar schools or create similar facilities for skaters to thrive, basically.
Amazing.
Are there other examples than this one of Bordeaux that I just mentioned, or do you know of any other schools that might have opened since you guys opened in 2006?
The people in Bordeaux are doing such great things. We actually did a collab last year where my students got to do ads for their zine.
Oh, nice. Cool. Interesting.
So we're trying to keep in contact. But yeah, there's a lot of NGOs and other people that come by, and I always try to share as much as I can. But because the school systems are very, very different, it's hard to apply something, just take it out of the box and put it in the next box. But I was coaching the national team in China prior to the Olympics for only a short period. It was only a month, but I went there because I really wanted to try and see if my way of teaching could work in another context, because I've only been in this little Bryggeriet box for the last 15 years. Yeah. And that was really interesting to try my methods on a totally different group who had a totally different approach to skateboarding.
Sure, absolutely. And how did it go?
It was interesting. I almost got fired the third day. Then once I made it past that, it worked, and I really learned that working with relations and trust works. That was the receipt I got.
Okay.
But it was a bumpy road, to say the least. I try to work on an eye-to-eye level and try to learn together with my students and try to, go into the learning process together. And in a skate session, that's so easy to do. But when I, in China, at the end of every day, ask the students what they learned today and what they needed from me to be a better teacher the next day than I was today, like a small evaluation, on the third day, they got really worried. And my assistant took me aside and said, they heard great things about you, and now they're really worried that you don't know how to do your job. And I was like, what's going on? He said, well, you're asking them what they learned and how you should do your job. Isn't that what a teacher knows already? Yeah. And I realized that, my approach was maybe I didn't take responsibility for my authority and my knowledge. So with a little help from my good friend Åsa Bäckström, a Swedish scholar on sports education, she wrote me a really sour email and was like, go out there and own your role instead of pretending to be this humble person who no one who no one respects.
Be as arrogant as possible.
So after that, I changed my approach a little bit, and it worked better.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, that was the closest thing I've ever come to actually, applying my methods or my work onto someone else. But I try to share to different NGOs and projects as much as I can. And if anyone listens to this and wants my help, please get in contact and invite me to wherever they are, because people come to Malmö all the time and visit, and I'm like, can I please just leave and go somewhere else?
Yeah. My fees are reasonable.
Yeah, I have 2 shots now.
Well, I think we've covered a lot, but is there anything else you wanted to discuss, perhaps, or?
Whoa, it feels like we've touched on everything and nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we could keep talking forever, but
I just want to emphasize or say that to be a teacher and to have a voice in a time when young adults are the most vulnerable, open to change and everything, is a great privilege, and it's not a role that should be taken seriously. Right. And I love my work, and I know that privilege, and I try to make it as fun as possible, but I also understand the impact it can have, and that it is first and foremost a very serious role that we as teachers are given.
Absolutely.
And I hate when people nag on the youth or anything, because no matter what we think about them or how whack their style is or how bad they do pressure flips or whatever, it's still them. They are our material. They're the ones who are going to take over when we're gone.
Exactly.
So we just better do our best to prepare them as much as we can and share as much as we can.
Yeah.
It might sound pretentious, but that's what I really, really believe in when it comes to my work.
Yeah. It looks like you have a great approach to all that. And again, we mentioned all the great skaters that have come out of that school. And so you definitely proven that you're doing your job well. Not just you, but all the team at Bryggeriets. And so, yeah, it looks like something's working for sure.
Yeah, and in the end, all we do is give them this platform and try to give them an environment in which they can learn stuff. Mm-hmm. But then the actual work is all on them.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it for my conversation with John Dahlquist. If you want to learn more about Bryggeriets, I recommend you check out Phil Evans's little 3-piece documentary on the school on Vimeo. Follow Bryggeriets on Instagram at Bryggeriets Gymnasium, follow John at Semester Skate, and keep an eye open for all the talent that has come out and will keep coming out of that amazing high school. Thank you for listening to this episode. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Boards.